When Alfred Watkins' Straight Track Club wound up in the 1940s, Leys went out of the public consciousness, for the most part until 1961. Then it was an interest in UFOs and their possible connection with the alignments that brought them back. Philip Heselton, later the first editor of the Lay Hunter, and I were friends at a school in Sunbury, Middlesex, and our interest was sparked by a book in the school library, Flying Saucers Have Landed, by George Adamski and Desmond Leslie. Most of the book, by Desmond Leslie, was about what we today would call ancient aliens, before Erich von Daniken's work, but a short piece at the end, almost an appendix, was by George Adamski, claiming to have met an extraterrestrial in the California desert. Our interest caused a surge of enthusiasm at the school, which caused the headmaster to remove the book from the school library. Then Philip subscribed to Flying Saucer Review and read an article by someone called Tony Wedd, who was starting an organisation interested in contact claims, and shortly afterwards we both went to visit him. We didn't originally know anything about Leys. It seems more than likely that if these things had not happened, the upsurge of interest in the 1960s, which included the work of John Michel, would not have happened. Tony was born on the portals of the Somerset Zodiac, and when young went for walks on Wag Drove, the tail of the great dog of Langport. While in Canada, during the war, he was fortunate enough to meet the discoverer of the Zodiac, Catherine Maltwood, at her home in British Columbia. She said she thought he must have been one of the Templars. It was in 1947, however, that he first read Watkins' The Old Straight Track. He was living at Hampstead at the time, and fresh from reading the book, he took a walk across Parliament Hill to Highgate Ponds.
Shortly after reading Watkins' book, I took a walk across Hampstead Heath, and approaching Kenwood from Highgate Ponds, I saw one solitary Scots pine, 10 foot clear of all the beech trees, way up in the sky. And I said, that's a mark if ever I saw a mark. And at that very moment I looked a little way to the left, where the one and only tumulus on Hampstead Heath was sighted. And I said, well, that mark was meant to be seen from here, and it lines through with that tumulus. So I took whatever directions I was able to without a compass, found roughly the alignment through to the top of Parliament Hill, and went back to my map, where it lined through to Westminster Abbey. And I remembered the old legend of Westminster Abbey, that it was sited on what was then called Thorny Island because of a remarkable clump of thorns on the island. And the legend went on to describe how when the bishop was due to consecrate the abbey, a fisherman notified him that it had already been consecrated in advance. And I take it that this was a way of saying the thorn clump on Thorny Island was already holy. Anybody who is familiar with Christopher Robin will doubtless remember the tall pine trees at the top of the forest. The forest, of course, is Ashdown Forest. The 100-acre wood is over that side, and this is where Christopher Robin used to sit down with Pooh, I suppose. I forget the exact details. It's a long time ago. The tall pine tree is now known as Gill's Lap, and I have found the word Gill coming in again and again on these lays in Kent. It's a beautiful spot, way up on the hills, and I think you'll find that that lines through with Westminster Abbey, the tumulus on Hampstead Heath, and the Scots pine in Kenwood. Here you see the wheel of Kent, the chalk dotted in, and it was originally, of course, a dome over the wheel. The dome has been eroded away and left the North Downs and the South Downs and the chalk of Hampshire. This is the lay I have just mentioned to you through Gill's Lap, Ashdown Forest is the spine in the middle of the wheel, and this line through to Westminster Abbey and Gills Lap runs along the county boundary.
On moving to Kent in 1955, Tony observed similar clumps of Scots pines in the countryside round Chiddingstone, frequently occupying prominent positions on or near hilltops on the North Downs, the Sevenoaks Range and the Upper Weald. Whilst living in the flat at Chiddingstone Castle, he first noticed the alignment of these clumps, mentioned in his booklet Skyways and Landmarks. This was the line from Chested to Mark Beach.
Mark Beach, a little closer up, this is the clump here. The fact that it's called Mark Beach is interesting because I think what it means, Mark equals Scots pine. What they're saying is this is a mixture of beech and Scots pine, which is perfectly true. On the brow of that hill, right to the right there of the clump itself, is an ordnance survey creek station, little concrete fence for setting up a theodolite. Very interesting that the modern surveyor and the ancient surveyor both chose the same spot. You have this happening again and again, incidentally. That's a close-up of Mark Beach. I don't know whether you can detect the pine trees in among the beeches. This is only about 4 miles from my home, and I frequently go there. It's a lovely landmark for seeing miles around. We're on a different lay now. It starts at Gilridge Farm here, on the edge of the forest, and travels through a number of marks which I'd like to present to you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very striking marks in a straight line. This is Mark Beach right in the middle of the picture where Mrs. Everest, Mark Beach, pulsating white light, 4:00 hours, 10th of August, 1960.
Tony also introduced us to the book Flying Saucers and the Straight Line Mystery by French UFO researcher Aimé Michel, who had found that UFO sightings from any particular day of a UFO flap in France formed alignments which converged on nodal points similar to Leys. He was convinced that these orthotonies, from Greek words meaning stretched out in a straight line, and Leys were one and the same. He had the opportunity later, in August 1963, of a 5.5-day tour of northern France. His aim was to see whether there were pine trees at the places where Aimé Michel's orthotonies crossed, though he restricted his investigation to those places where the UFOs visibly altered course, and at the moment of doing so, executed a falling leaf manoeuvre.
Aimé Michel has exceptionally well documented account of saucer sightings in France. And I picked 3 of these cases where the falling leaf manoeuvre was recorded. Now, Aimé Michel says the falling leaf manoeuvre is always identified with a change of direction. When a saucer is travelling along one straight line, stops and changes to another, there it does a falling leaf. This is something I used to do in a little tiger moth. It's quite against the rules. Off I went to France, to 3 places where Aimé Michel recorded falling leaves. The first place was Mersange in Burgundy, and I hadn't seen many Scots pines for quite a way. So as I drove in to the village, which is beyond the trees there, late one evening, I had the thrill of my life to see 1, 2, 3 Scots pines on the corner of the village. Now it so happens that is the corner of the village where the flying saucer was seen. And so I went to bed very much content that a journey of 1,000 miles or so had been worthwhile. I went on to the Jura, up into the high borderland with Switzerland. And I went to a village called Frasnes, named by Aimé Michel as a place where a flying saucer was sighted. So I couldn't find anything that looked like a clump of pine trees. I was very fed up because my theory was falling to bits. So I got out my Michel and I read it up, and of course it was not Frasnes at all. The party was travelling towards Frasnes, and in fact saw the flying saucer close to Dompierre on their left. So I turned off at Dompierre and went in the direction indicated by left. And there on the hilltop was just what I was looking for. Then I had one snag as far as I could see. There are 2 sorts of pine trees. 2 basic sorts. sorts, perhaps I should say. There are many sorts, but two basic sorts. The Pinus sylvestris, which is the true Scots pine, the ancient one, and the Pinus nigra, which is a more conventional pine. It does not have the red bark and drop its lower branches in the same way. And this clump, well, I couldn't complain about this clump of ground. It was pretty good to me. And the pine tree sitting on the corner, so I took my photograph from over here, and then I went up close. As I went up close, I was delighted to see two things. First of all, inside the clump were the Scots pines mixed with the Pinus nigra, and holy ground again. Someone had identified it as such with a little Madonna, and there's a little grotto built round it. So I think two scores. This is the place where the flying saucer changed course. Whether he was actually hovering over the clump, perhaps deriving some energy from it, or from the ground under it, whether it was a navigational point, and he actually looked out of the flying saucer, yes, that's the test down there, we're all right, chum, let's go from the other leg, or whether some instrument on board records the test crossover point between northwest lay number 16 and southeast lay number 51. No named numbered thing again. I do not know. I'm simply following the best evidence I can. I then went off to the banks of the Rhine to a little pair of villages, Nifair and Caen. And it was very late when I drove into Nifair, and I drove along the road to Caen. I was fed up with nothing like a clump or tumulus or stones either side of the road as I drove. And I parked the car in the woods, rather disconsolate, and spent the night there. And woke up in the morning to see pink plonk all along the sky. The place was a mass of Scots pine. Which particular clump the sources were identified with, I do not know. I didn't see any particular clump, but they were there in large numbers.
It's interesting that a number of the 1950s contactees have allegedly made reference to energy lines over the Earth. Tony was particularly interested in a statement by Buck Nelson, a farmer in America, who said he was told by his contactors that the spaceships travel along magnetic currents and that each of these is named and numbered. The places where the magnetic currents cross is comparable to a crossroads sign.
Given me by Buck Nelson, who may or may not have been to Mars, the Moon and Venus, I do not know. But what he described in his book was that the space people told him the flying saucers travel along magnetic currents, which is exactly what Adamski said. He said further that the magnetic currents are named and numbered. Oh, that's Buck Nelson's contribution. Now the critical thing that tipped me off about the whole business of Leys and saucers was one other thing Buck Nelson said, which after all he had no reason to say and has no connection, I doubt, even if he understands what he said. He said, where the magnetic currents cross is comparable to a crossroads sign. I don't think Buck Nelson is an educated man at all. And I doubt he had the foggiest notion that Alfred Watkins was studying Leys. But that sentence could be read without the last word. Where the magnetic currents cross is comparable to crossroads, fair enough. The crossroads sign can only mean a sign on the Earth. And therefore we must look for landmarks, prehistoric landmarks, because we know flying saucers have been around for donkey's years. And therefore there's an immediate link up with what Buck Nelson has said and what Alfred Watkins has said about Leys.
In the famous Rendlesham UFO incident in 1980, Sergeant Jim Peniston touched a landed craft, and the following day he was seeing ones and zeros in his mind's eye and felt compelled to write them in his notebook. When he'd done this, they stopped. 30 years later, after he had left the US Air Force, he showed them to Linda Moulton Howe, who recognized them as binary code. When they were decoded, they revealed a message about exploration of humanity, and giving a string of longitude and latitude references of ancient and or powerful places such as the Great Pyramid, Sedona, Arizona, and the lines of Nazca. This is the message which suggests they were time travellers rather than extraterrestrials. though as Nick Pope said, they could be both. There seem to be latitude and longitude references to significant places which some researchers have linked with Earth energy grids. The message reads, Exploration of Humanity 666-8100. This suggests some kind of project from the year 666 AD to 8100. 666 was the year of the founding of Chertsey Abbey, mentioned by Gloria Hazel as one of the places with similar feelings to Sedona, Arizona, and found to be on a great circle between it and the Great Pyramid. 52.094253 north, 13.131269W. This is the reference for High Brazil, the Phantom Island of Ireland. High Brazil is a mysterious island appearing on maps from 1325 to the 1800s. This map is from 1325. In Irish myth, it was said to be clouded in mist, except for one day every 7 years, when it became visible, but still could not be reached. Stories about the island have circulated throughout Europe for centuries, with tales that it was the promised land of saints or a paradise where advanced civilization lived. On most maps, the island was located roughly 321 kilometres, 200 miles, off the west coast of Ireland, in the North Atlantic Ocean. Does this imply that it's the craft's origin, on a par with other significant places, but possibly able to be submerged? The Sedona to Pyramids line, postulated by Gloria Hazel, could pass through it, as it goes through the southern part of Ireland before reaching Britain. Continuous for planetary advance. Fourth coordinate, continuot, UQS CBPR before. 16.763177 north, 89.117768 west, Caracol, Belize, Mayan ruins. Caracol is a large ancient Maya archaeological site in the Cayo district of Belize, approximately 40 kilometers south of Swantanish and San Ignacio Cayo, and 15 kilometers away from the Macal River. It rests on the Vaca Plateau at an elevation of 500 meters above sea level, in the foothills of the Maya Mountains. It was one of the most important regional political centers in the Maya lowlands during the Classic period, and covered approximately 200 square kilometers, much larger than present-day Belize City, and supported more than twice the modern city's population. Caracol is a modern name from Spanish meaning snail or shell. Cana, Sky Palace, is the largest building at Caracol, and is the tallest man-made structure in Belize at 43 meters tall, 141 feet. 34.800272 north, 111.843567 west, Sedona, Arizona. Regarded as energetic and spiritual, sometimes called the American Glastonbury. Sedona is a town in Arizona, USA, which has gained a reputation as a spiritual energy centre similar to Glastonbury in the United Kingdom. It's claimed to have vortexes which are thought to be swirling centres of energy that are conducive to healing, meditation and self-exploration. These are places where the earth seems especially alive with energy. The Palatki ruins, located near Sedona, are an ancient site that is filled with cliff dwellings, as well as pictographs and petroglyphs that were created by the southern Sinagua people who inhabited the Sedona and Verde Valley area from 500 to about 1425 AD. Palatki, which is the Hopi word for red house, features a cliff dwelling that was constructed in roughly 1150 AD. The cliff dwelling is about 2 stories high and contains the telltale pottery sherds that are the reminders of the lives of those who once dwelled here. Although the petroglyphs and pictographs are quite close to the cliff dwelling, they are not related to it. Many of the 1,000 petroglyphs and pictographs are between 5,000 and 6,000 years old, far older than the cliff dwelling. The rock art features a myriad of pictures and symbols that are rendered in various colours. Among the pictures are humans, grizzly bears, horses, coyote, deer, and even rattlesnakes. 29.977836 north, 31.131649 east, Great Pyramid in Giza, Egypt. The Great Pyramid of Giza, also known as the Pyramid of Khufu or the Pyramid of Cheops, is the oldest and largest of the 3 pyramids in the Giza Pyramid Complex, bordering present-day Giza in Greater Cairo, Egypt. It's the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world and the only one to remain largely intact. 14.701 505S 75167043 West, Nazca Lines in Peru. The Nazca Lines are a group of very large geoglyphs made in the soil of the Nazca Desert in southern Peru. They were created between 500 BC and 500 AD by people making depressions or shallow incisions in the desert floor, removing pebbles and leaving differently coloured dirt exposed. The area seems to be on 3 great circle lines involving other sites mentioned in the Rendlesham message. One goes through Nazca, then Oak Island, Nova Scotia, Canada, and Tai Shan Q in China. Another goes through Nazca, Tai Shan Q, and Ayers Rock in Australia. Another goes through Nazca, Caracol, Belize, Sedona, and Tai Shan Q. The 3 lines meet again at Tai Shan Q, meaning this is antipodal to Nazca. The 3 lines meeting at Nazca meet again at Tai Shan Q in China, on the other side of the world. 36.256845 north, 117.100632 east, Tai Shan Q, China, known as China's holiest mountain. Mount Tai is located just north of the city of Tai'an. Evidence of human settlement of the area can be proven from the Neolithic period onwards. Religious worship of Mount Tai has a tradition dating back 3,000 years. The name Tai'an of the neighbouring city is attributed to the saying, "If Mount Tai is stable, so is the entire country." 37.110195 north, 25.372281 east, Portara at Temple of Apollo in Naxos, Greece. The imposing ruins of the iconic Portara, or gate, still stand on the islet of Palatia, near Naxos, Greece. What remains of a temple dedicated to Apollo, which was built in the 6th-7th century BC and was never completed, stands behind it today in mute beauty. According to Greek mythology, the god Theseus left Ariadne, whom he had earlier abducted from Crete, after he had killed the Minotaur, to live on Naxos. This site seems to be on the Sedona High Brazil Chertsey line postulated by Gloria Hazel, before it reaches the Great Pyramid. Eyes of Your Eyes, origin 52.0942532 north, 13.131269 west, High Brazil. Origin year 8100. This seems to suggest that the origin of the craft is High Brazil, and the origin year is 8100, seemingly implying that they are time travellers. The time distortion at Rendlesham could be caused by proximity to a time engine. All these things seem to suggest the message was concerned with an Earth grid. In March 1992, I was working as a resource assistant for Surrey TVEI, Technical and Vocational Educational Initiative, a local authority educational advisory organisation. We had just purchased a Dartcom weather satellite system, and I had been involved in setting it up and running it. I noticed something unusual on the transmission sent on March the 4th. It was a white dot, relatively large, in part of the picture off southwest Ireland. I've not noticed anything similar on any other pictures sent by the satellite, Meteosat. The picture was taken in visible light. Some of the transmissions were in infrared at 4:30 in the afternoon. The software has facilities for enhancing the pictures in various ways. One is a zoom facility by which one can enlarge a chosen section of any picture. I found that for some reason the overlays representing the outlines of land masses did not appear in the normal sized picture, but they did on the zoomed version. I don't know why this is, but it was useful in this instance, for it showed the white dot was not a rogue dot coming from the overlay, and it also allowed easy recognition of the position of the object, if such it was, though not the height, of course. The fact that nothing of the kind was noticed on any other of the pictures seems to indicate that it was not likely to be anything like an aircraft or a ship, or a defect in the transmission. Also, although it was not very apparent in the reproduction here, when the original picture is magnified, the unidentified dot is much more solid white than the overlay dots, which seem rather diffused. It also seems rounder. Although I didn't know of the High Brazil tradition at the time, I was just thinking it might be a UFO. The dot seems to have been in the approximate position of the Mystery Island on the 14th century map. The Rendlesham UFO incident had occurred several years before, but this strange message that Jim Penniston apparently received, mentioning High Brazil, was not decoded till many years later. What are we to make of all this? It seems to indicate that High Brazil is a submersible extraterrestrial base which has been here for centuries, and that this has been imparted from several events in a rather convoluted timeline. Also, it seems to be important to realise that it's part of a grid alignment going through Sedona and the Great Pyramid. The number 666, the year of the founding of Chertsey Abbey, in the message could indicate that the Abbey is the significant point in the West London area, and Gloria's statement that it had the same feeling as Sedona to her supports this. Why these things have been revealed at this particular time we don't know, but the timings of the events would seem to be deliberate.